So I'm here this afternoon with pontificating Paul. I know Paul from Twitter for some time, and he put up a thread this week about a video prepared for School District 61. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
SD 61 in Victoria about gender ideology. It's a SOGI information session. And I spent some time watching that hour and a half long video this morning before Paul and I connected. Um, and I wanted to get your impressions, Paul, and maybe a little bit of background. When did you first kind of wake up to this stuff that's going on in schools? You're a dad as well.
Yeah.
Uh,
If I recall, it was I'm gonna guess 5 or 6 years ago, something like that. Um, there was a transgender he goes by a man. It was Jen Smith. He was putting on a presentation in Windsor Park, um, in Oak Bay, and he was criticizing SOGI essentially. And I had no idea about any of it. I didn't know. I was just like, people were upset, and online, the various different groups and stuff, community groups, and it was really, really intense, and a lot of like hate speech claims and all of that. So I was naturally, I just have a rule that I see for myself and make my own judgments.
mhm.
And so I was like, okay, well, let's see what this is about. And I looked at his presentation. I um, I read as much as I could about it. I looked at the arguments against the presentation and the whole thing, and none of it made sense. I saw no hate speech. I just saw criticism of something. I'm sure my memory is a little bit, that was a long time ago. I'm sure there might have been elements that were a little bit more on the radical side, but I didn't see any evidence of hate speech. Of course, now because there's hate speech law in Canada, it technically would count as that, but not with my understanding of it. It was just criticism of the ideas. So, and then I watched a local school trustee and members of the NDP. Randall Garrison was down there.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like there was someone else that I can't recall. And there was a huge rally. They shut it down. They didn't let anyone speak. If I don't particularly like uh to get into those conflicts like on the ground, so I didn't go, but I didn't feel like I could go and listen. And they were preventing anyone from speaking, noisemakers, chanting, pulling fire alarms. And this was led by a school trustee. And I just thought a democratically elected official should uphold the democratic values of our society and let the person speak and let the people listen. And freedom of speech is not just the freedom to speak, it's the freedom to listen, it's the freedom from being compelled to speak, it's the freedom from being compelled to listen. So I felt like that was all, I was compelled. I couldn't listen. I was denied the chance to inform myself, and those the rule that I had, which is just to inform myself and make my own decisions. So
Mhm.
I remember I sent an email to the school district. I was like, "Are you going to reprimand this guy?" Like, it was like that was not okay, and I was surprised Randall Garrison did it too. I think I reached out to him on Twitter or something. I don't think he's that active, so he probably didn't see it. But they just fully supported it. I just couldn't believe it, and that's when I knew that there was something fundamentally wrong with like the ethos of our society, and people were not I was not operating on the same level as others. I wasn't about
Yeah.
to go out of my way to stop for somebody from speaking about something that they were passionate about, and um that I didn't agree with or disagree with. So I definitely felt apart. at that moment
Yeah.
in time.
Now, had you made the connection at the time, your kids would have been a bit younger than they are now? I think you said they were 6 and 11 now.
No, they're 7 and 9.
7 and 9.
So
Okay.
yeah, so I was really in infant land at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. So it probably wasn't on the education thing probably wasn't on your radar at that point.
No.
Just the issue of speech and um, uh, some of the ideology being put forth. Uh,
Yeah.
and so most recently, I guess the school or the school district put out a link to a video, a SOGI education video that you shared
Hmm.
on Twitter.
Hmm.
Um, and I just finished watching that, and there's a lot there. I'm interested though in what you felt were some of the highlights and lowlights and um, the issues with the video as it was shared.
Um, well, I was shocked that um the education that the school district would even send that to parents. Um, and the content was so, it really owned what it was selling. Like it was proud of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, this there's always the disclaimer, like there's a Mont and Bailey going on where anytime you try and talk to anyone about this that's involved in it, it's all about accepting people, they say. And
Yeah,
that's the easy thing to understand. But if it was about accepting people, then the logical conclusion would be letting boys and girls be boys and girls in whatever way they see that makes sense. There's no reason to change the definitions of boy and girl, and then now call yourself a girl if you're a boy because you like girl things or have a more feminine temperament, you know. Um, so I was surprised to see that the Bailey, where the idea that gender is imposed, that that the whole social construction idea that souls are gendered. At one point he had everyone, yeah, requested everyone close their eyes and sense, you know, what gender your soul was or your spirit. And
yeah,
I mean, that to me was like that's actually like a theory of being. Like that's religious.
of
I'm
course.
So I mean, that's just not appropriate in schools. We're not teaching kids that they have souls and that the souls are have a gender. So, and the biggest shocking one was the claim that puberty blockers are fine and that you can go on them and then go on them for a while and then decide to have a baby, go off them, have the baby, and then go back on them, and just that just defied logic to me. It's like, I mean, puberty literally develops the things that allow you to have the baby. I guess that's what they meant by going off. But that's not that. There's permanent damages from puberty blockers if you're
Yeah,
on them.
it really that really showed to me that there was a deep misunderstanding about what puberty blockers are
Mhm.
and a very superficial knowledge. Now it seems there was three organizations associated with this. One was the school district.
Yeah,
One was I
the
guess it
Org
was
Foundation.
the ARC Foundation, and
Yeah,
then there was an LGBTQ plus corporation,
yeah.
a consultant of some sort who was doing the presenting. So you've got two outside organizations participating in this training for public education,
Mhm.
um, and and the yeah, this thing I assumed as he was talking, got to talking, that he was probably referring to cross-sex hormones and that he didn't understand the difference between cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers. Um,
That's
but
possible. I
and
didn't
that
get
was
that
just sort of
impression.
treating them as the same thing in
Yeah,
language.
yeah. It's possible. I mean, when for me, I just want to. I'm discovering the best thing to do is just keep it all super simple. And the guy suggested halting puberty in children, natural development. based on identity, subjective
Yeah,
identity.
and because it can be
Impression.
traumatic, right?
Yeah.
Developing an Adam's apple, he said, could be traumatic for someone who believes they're a girl. Uh,
Yeah, and like if someone has gender dysphoria, they would find the idea of becoming, going through their natural development as, um, scary. But, when you look at the statistics and the studies, that isn't just borne out by the data. I mean, most of them desist. And then the studies that they support, like I saw a study that someone was making a case for that being okay. And right in the beginning of the study, they said the whole literature is not rigorous and that it may result in type 1 errors, which means false positives, which, when you're dealing with a minority of conditions, like a low percentage of the population, if you're going to misdiagnose people to have it when they don't, more people are going to get hurt. So, um, it, even the activist studies to support the claim that puberty blockers are okay, the studies acknowledge it themselves that it's not rigorous. And I mean, Sweden, Norway, the
mhm.
UK, I believe Denmark, that there's a handful of nations in Europe that have stopped, like either banned it or restricted to clinical trials. I mean, these are all intelligent, smart people making these decisions. That surely has got to make people think, hey, maybe this isn't such a good idea. I don't get how people, that doesn't flag for people.
You mentioned also that there's other dads that who are concerned about this stuff, but people are they're worried about speaking up and the consequences of doing that. Um, how much do you think people are self-censoring in your environment and falsifying preferences just to avoid the kind of militant and aggressive pushback that people can get?
How many?
Yeah, well, I mean, is it how would you characterize it, I guess, as having an impact on speech and on
Oh yeah.
um,
Yeah, I mean there is an absolute stigmatization of being able to criticize it. I mean, here's an example. So the Million March for Kids, which there's a bunch of accusations about it just being a lot of bad apples. Um, and but it's not. I was there. They were just, the people I talked to were reasonable and common sense and nice people. Um, the school put up the progress flag in support of the counter protests against that, which basically stigmatized any parents, because it was no space for hate, right? And that
right,
was the symbol of it. So they put a no space for hate symbol at the time that the no space for hate was going on at the school. They took a political position for one side of a political debate that's happening down at the legislature, which was people saying, hey, SOGI's got some problems, um, or we don't like it for X, Y, and Z. And now, the schools actively characterizing legitimate criticism for that as hate. So there, it's just a total stigmatization. And for parents, the ones that I've talked to aren't comfortable talking to anyone about it or being able to be tracked or having a paper trail. There are parents that are willing to risk it. And then there's some that just don't believe it's happening, that their kids are being taught that, you know the activists would say this is wrong, but it's not. Is that, you're uh, they're teaching kids to associate their feelings with stereotypes in society and then identifying with them, kind of like shopping for labels, essentially.
right,
Under the guise of saying you don't have to abide by the stereotypes of the gender you're assigned or have been imposed upon. Look at all the other genders you can choose based on the various stereotypes that are around. There was a saying I heard a while ago, that what is it? Sexism is when a woman has to do the dishes because she's a woman. Equality is when a man or woman could do the dishes, and gender ideology is whoever does the dishes is a woman. So it's like it really
Yeah.
bears it in that thing. But I'm digressing. You know, my sample size is small with who I talk to. I feel uncomfortable bringing it up to people that haven't brought it up before. Um, and like I've posted in groups and reasonably well crafted posts, and they've been taken down for hate speech. So
Yeah.
I mean, it gives you a barometer of what's going on, and this is just saying, hey, this is I think biology and evolution are actually valid concepts, and this goes against that, and I disagree.
Yeah.
And that makes parents hateful, and I don't want you to teach that to my kids because I think it's incorrect. So
I was talking to a mom, a mom in BC, I'm talking to parents all across the country about this issue and have been for some time. Um, and there is a coordinated campaign right now to letter write to the chair of the Chilliwack School Board
mm,
because there's a whole bunch of crazy going on there. And we've been working on something called the Parents' Rights Coalition of Canada for the last, well, really, we started the framework before Christmas last year. So about a year now. We've formed some principles and a white paper and a foundation, and we're bringing together parents groups from across the country and trying to coordinate some efforts. It would seem to me that um, spending some time on this video and really, picking maybe 3 or 4 things that are really egregious and summarizing them, and then seeing if we can get some letter writing to go on,
mhm.
um, and combine it maybe with a press release to the local paper, um, and do that on behalf of an organization rather than an individual, which diffuses some of the impact
Yeah, for
of
sure.
of pushback. And uh, so it seems to me that there's an opportunity for growth. That some communities are pushing back more successfully than others, or are ahead in the pushback because they've had more time to organize and kind of test the responses of the school board and the teachers and the institutions after bumping up against them a few times to figure out what works.
Yeah.
Um, so I bookmarked a bunch of stuff from that video, and I think I'm gonna spend a little time on it, and we'll talk about it on the Gender Wars report this week,
Hmm.
and then I'll mention it to the executive, and see if we can craft some kind of template and raise some awareness of this. I mean, these things go by unquestioned, and that's just a tacit acceptance of what's being put out.
Yeah.
And I laughed at the end of the video. They were talking about the history, queer history,
Hmm.
and they were showing pictures of the Stonewall riots and the police interventions in the late '60s in New York, and the presenter said, well, they haven't taken pictures of any of the trans people that were there, and there were lots of them because of the bias of the photographer.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well,
Like,
yeah, that's a consequence of thinking all knowledge and truth is subjective,
yeah,
and that's at the core of these lessons, and that's a big problem. I don't think that's not correct, and that's a deliberate philosophy being injected into our education system. That's the more subtle stuff, um, and it's probably I think it's easy to lose people on that, but yeah, it's just sticking to what why are boy and girl being redefined, and and the fact that this movement is using our same vocabulary but a totally different dictionary, and that's how they're getting a lot of buy-in,
yeah,
and it's creating this sort of fog that people can either not understand or not argue against. But
yeah.
yeah, that'd be great. But
It all sounds very nice and very lovely. We want safety, and we people to feel safe, and we want inclusion, and it's about protecting people, but the reality is you're talking about, and we were talking before we started recording about people who are very afraid
Mhm.
of speaking out to the extent that they just won't. They won't
Yeah.
expose themselves to the risk associated with it because that this safety culture has actually created an environment where most people feel very intimidated.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, nobody wants to. I mean, even there's parents that I've met that are in the medical field where they're just on eggshells when they have to treat any patients um in this regard, or they've been reprimanded for not towing the line, or using the correct, or criticizing it. You know,
Yep.
I've known some doctors that have had that experience and stuff like that. It's
Broadly speaking, Paul, what field do you work in?
just like the computer industry.
Okay.
It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty programming kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm. Well, I hope you keep us posted about developments in Victoria
Yeah, yeah,
going forward. And I appreciate getting having a conversation from you today and getting some insights from that video. We're going to post a link to the video, as well as um, to some of those parents' rights resources I was mentioning, Paul. And I hope that there's some developments there in Victoria that look positive in the near future, and that the conversation can open up a bit more.
yeah, me too. I hope so. Yeah, people just, most people disagree with this stuff. And it's definitely a silent majority. It's just a matter of enough people coming forward for people to feel safe enough to do it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, good luck. Hopefully, there's some people who step forward out there in Victoria and
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
start.
understand why they don't here. I mean, it's intense. It's very intense. So,
Yep.
mhm.
All
Awesome.
right. Good luck. Thanks for chatting
Yeah,
today,
cool.
Paul.
Thank you.
Now, where's my